A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Now Herod the ruler heard about all that had taken place with Jesus, and he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had been raised from the dead, by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the ancient prophets had arisen. Herod said, "John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things?" And he tried to see him. Okay, Herod. This is an interesting, tiny little snippet in Luke's gospel, and we get to peek into the mind of someone who is feeling intrigued by what he hears about Jesus, and also a little worried about how whatever this is might intersect with his big guilty secret, or even maybe not so much a secret, but just his big guilty thing that he hasn't quite worked out in his life. And, we get this in a different gospel text with the dance of Salome and whatnot. And you've got all kinds of, we get to hear the interior voice of Herod, and we get to hear it again here, where Herod is confronted by God's action in the world, is listening, is intrigued by it. And you'll recall in the story before, Herod kept John imprisoned for quite some time in the basement, basically in the cellar, in shackles, because he loved to listen to him. Even though Herod was living a pretty dissolute life, and John the Baptist was saying to Herod, "You have no business being with your brother's wife. You need to stop that." John was really the externalized conscience for Herod. And so here we get this same thing, but in very much just more micro version in this version of the story. And Herod hears about Jesus out in the world. He's intrigued. Herod is a person who cares about things apparently having to do with morality, things having to do with this communal life. He is a person who has some impulses and some curiosity around the gospel message, and indeed around John the Baptist's message. And so this comes up, he hears what's going on, his antenna go up, and he's curious. And people are saying, when they see the deeds of power that Jesus is doing, some people are saying he's John the Baptist raised from the dead, which we all know is a great concern for Herod, for obvious reasons. So so people are saying it's John coming back. Some people are saying it's a prophet raised from the dead. There's other different things that are being put out there as hypotheses for who and what this is. But notice that Herod's mind goes right to the thing that's apparently simmering never that far beneath the surface. He knows what he's done. He knows he's not done right by John the Baptist. He knows that he beheaded him because he just couldn't take that externalized voice of conscience anymore, and he just decided to end it by snuffing out the person who was that voice of conscience. And so as the people, and some are thinking this and some are thinking that, you'll notice how Herod gravitates towards wanting to debunk that first one about it being John raised from the dead, because I beheaded him. So let me know what's going on. Let me see who this is. And so his curiosity, some would even say perhaps his spiritual yearning, persists, even though he's worried about the big bad thing he did. How does that hit our lives these days? You might think, well, I'm not aware that I'm carrying around some big secret, but it doesn't take very long for me to look back and see that there are some unresolved places in my life, be they relationships with other people, with children, with other family, where it doesn't take a lot sometimes to trigger a sense of concern or even shame or regret, to think about, when something was like, oh, well, I don't think about that. I put that on a box and put it far away. And so I'm interested in how Jesus' glory in the world both raises Herod's curiosity and his concern that makes him revisit this thing about which he clearly doesn't feel settled. He doesn't feel great about having beheaded John, for very good reasons, and in fact feels concerned now that maybe John's back. So is there somewhere in your life where thinking about the glory of God triggers for you, oh, I don't really have that thing worked out yet. I don't know that I'm ready to meet Jesus face to face, or meet Christ, or meet God face to face, or feel resolved about my life because X is still sitting out there for me. I wonder, as we think about the places where God's glory is revealed, is there any shadow in our lives that it brings to light through the glory of God, throwing into relief those places of shadow that we still carry within us? If that is the case for you, if that sounds familiar to you, this is an invitation this day for us to be aware of those, and to remember that the invitation from God is always to bring those places of darkness or incompleteness or sadness or damage in our souls, and to bring those, we're always invited to bring them to God and to lay them before the presence of a loving God who is always telling us that God is always more willing to receive than we are to give when it comes to receive our prayers than for us to give our prayers, always more willing to give grace than we are to ask for it, and to become aware of the places in our lives where there's still a little bit of unfinished business, a little bit of concern. If we thought we were about to meet Jesus face to face, let me get that sorted out. The invitation is always on the table for you and me to bring those places forward in our common prayer. Every time we gather, we do the prayer of general thanksgiving, to lay that before God and say, I don't know what to do with this. I don't feel I've finished it. It's not sorted. To lay that before God, to ask for God's healing and blessing and forgiveness and absolution and grace, and to see where that takes us. Hopefully, when we hear about Christ in the world or seeing Jesus face to face, we won't feel like we need to run back off and deal with some old business before we can full-throatedly acclaim his presence in our midst. I hope that gives you something to prayerfully consider for this day. May God bless you. May God bless you and keep you this day and always. Amen.